and he waited for those who were behind him to catch up. The symbolism is that don't go so far ahead of the Ahlul Bayt. Whereas you know there is a sect that we have in Islam that believe that Mawla Ali is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their slogan is Ali Allah, Ali Allah, Ali Allah. They actually believe that Mawla Ali is a creator. Then there is one sect that has hatred and nafrat and bughz for Mawla Ali in their heart. The symbolism of Ghadir is that don't go so far ahead of the Ahlul Bayt where you praise him to a point where you become a mushrik. And don't go so far behind the Ahlul Bayt where you have nafrat and hatred in their hearts. Come together with the Ahlul Bayt, live with the Ahlul Bayt, and use them as a source for your life. The symbolism is very beautiful. And so today it fits very well, very much so. And today we have to make an effort to study the lives of our imams, know who our imams were, and what they decided to do in certain situations, and what they didn't do in certain situations. And we do our best to mark that, inshallah. Salawat bi Hajji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I brought Nahj al-Balagha with me today, and I want to share a letter with you. Because again, we turn to the writings of the Ahlul Bayt, and we see what can we derive in terms of lessons from these individuals. What I want to do is turn to letter number 45 in Nahj al-Balagha. Letter number 45 was a letter that Mawla Ali wrote to Uthman ibn Hunayf. Salawat bi Hajji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Letter number 45 in Nahj al-Balagha is a letter, like I said, that Mawla Ali wrote to Uthman ibn Hunayf, who was the governor of Basra at that time. Mawla Ali got word that Uthman ibn Hunayf was invited to this masterful feast by one of the richest men of Basra, and he accepted this invitation. And that upset Mawla Ali, so he wrote him a letter. Now I'm not going to read the whole letter, but there are certain aspects of that letter that coincide with our topic today. So keeping in mind what I was saying about this idea that we can emulate these imams, and they are not individuals who are so high up on the status where we cannot emulate them. And here Mawla Ali explains how. He says, "O Ibn Hunayf," first of all, he describes to them why he was upset at this invitation. He says, "I have come to know that a young man of Basra invited you to a feast and you leapt towards it." Look at the selection of words that Mawla Ali uses. He says, "Foods of different colors were being chosen for you and big bowls were being given to you." He says, "I never thought that you would accept the feast of a person who ignores the beggars and invites only the rich." Now again, let's examine this first part of the letter and understand what Mawla Ali is trying to tell us. The first obvious lesson in this little portion of the letter is that every single time you get invited to an event, there's no need to leap and run to it. Some of our functions in our communities, especially our weddings, mashallah, are not events that can be quote-unquote Islamic events. That when it comes to the happiness of our home, sometimes we kind of lose ourselves. We have in a hadith that Allah tests you in two areas. One is extreme grief, and one is extreme happiness. We believe that, look, I have one daughter, she'll get married once. I want to make sure her wedding is a, mashallah, big bang. You know, it's one for the ages. So you rent out the massive hall, you hire the DJ, mashallah, you remove the curtain in between, the hijab goes flying off, and for one day you forget Islam. Why? Because your daughter's getting married. And we get invited to these functions. And we think, oh, I've known him for 30 years, 25 years, he came to my son's wedding. I can't say no to him, even though it goes against every fiber of your Islamic belief. And so for one day, it won't kill anybody. I'll go. And so we go. But Mawla is saying, don't leap towards these events. That here is a man from Basra who is showing off his riches, not by feeding the poor, which would have been Islamic, but instead he invites those who are equally as rich. And it becomes a competition. Oh yeah, if you think your event was good, wait till you see my event. And this is no place in Islam. And here the governor of Basra, a representative of Mawla Ali, is attending such a function, and Mawla is not happy with that. So the lesson that we can derive from this one portion of the letter, mashallah, you're a smart audience. Moving on. He says, remember that every follower has a leader whom he follows. He says, realize that your imam, and now he's talking about himself. He says, realize that your imam has contented himself with 2 pieces of clothing and 2 loaves of bread. Allahu Akbar. He says, realize for a moment that the imam that you follow is completely happy with 2 pieces of clothing and 2 loaves of bread. And then he says, certainly you cannot do so. He says, you cannot emulate me in this. I mentioned 2 days ago a man approaching Mawla Ali in rags and patches and says, Mawla, I'm trying to be your follower. If you recall that hadith I mentioned to all of you. And Mawla got angry and said, go back home. Allah has blessed you with wealth. Go back home, change your clothes, and be thankful to God. This is not what a follower of Ali is all about. Here he's saying, Ibn Hunayf, you can't be me in terms of my clothing and my food. But, he says, but at least support me in my taqwa, in my chastity, and in my firmness. Because by Allah, I have not treasured any gold out of your world, nor amassed any wealth, he says. Now again, he's making a very clean line and saying, look, there are certain aspects you cannot emulate me on, as I mentioned, and then there are certain aspects that you can emulate me on. He's saying that, look, I have trained myself enough to survive on pieces of bread. You can't do that. And I would not expect myself or yourself to live such a life. And the first discussion we had was about this dunya and living a nice life. Keep that in mind. However, where you can support me, he says, and he says, support me in my taqwa, in my chastity, in my firmness in my belief. Where if somebody invites you to a non-Islamic gathering, you sit there and say, look, brother, I'm sorry, I don't attend these functions. I'm not saying to be, Mr. Tabligh and say you shouldn't have these types of programs. They're not going to listen to you. But make it a point by your actions to say, you know what, I don't attend these functions. I'm sorry. May Allah bless you and your household. May Allah give your daughter happiness and send her my du'as, but I won't be there, I'm sorry. If you have a nikah in a masjid, I'll be there, no problem. But these types of gatherings are not for me. Now, I mentioned the fact, that's 2 aspects of this letter. The third aspect, again, coincides beautifully with our topic. I mentioned that there are certain titles and certain laqabs that we cannot emulate. Amir al-Mu'mineen was one of them. And ironically, well not ironically, but he addresses this issue in this letter. I read the letter before and then I made the speech up, by the way, so it wasn't ironic. He says this, shall I be content with simply being called Amir al-Mu'mineen? And he uses the actual laqab in the letter. Letter number 45, if you can read it at home, do so. Shall I be content with being called Amir al-Mu'mineen, at the same time not share with the people the hardships of life? Yani he's saying, look, I'm Amir al-Mu'mineen, fine. That doesn't mean that I sit on my throne and not feel the pain that you feel. It doesn't mean that I don't go through the hardships that you go through. It doesn't mean that I am oblivious to the pain that you're going through. He says, let me share in the hardships of this world. And he says,